Okay, let's start with a really big question. What actually defines a church? I mean, is it what it does? The programs, the outreach, the mission? Or is it something deeper, something about what it fundamentally is? Now, that might sound like a simple question, but there's a really compelling argument out there that for centuries, a lot of us have been getting the answer completely backward. And that one little mistake, well, it changes absolutely everything. So let's dive right in with this pretty shocking claim from the theologian Ben Witherington. He says that Protestantism has suffered from a bad or weak ecclesiology. That's a fancy way of saying a weak theology of the church, right from its very beginning. Wow, that's a huge statement, right? It suggests there's a fundamental flaw, like right at the source. So let's try to unpack this puzzle.
And this is where it gets so interesting because there's an immediate contradiction here. How on earth can the theology be weak when the actual original word for church is one of the simplest, most straightforward words in the entire Bible?
Yeah, the early Christians, they deliberately chose this Greek word ekklesia, and all it means is a gathering or an assembly. That's it. They saw themselves as the new gathering of God's people, picking up where the Old Testament left off. It's not a complicated or technical word, it's just about a people gathered together. So that brings us right back to the central mystery. If the word itself is so basic, where does this bad or weak theology actually come from? Well, it turns out the problem isn't with the word itself. It's with how we think about that word. The whole issue, believe it or not, boils down to two foundational questions about the church. And here's the kicker. It's not the questions themselves that are the problem, it's the order, the sequence in which we answer them. If you get that order wrong, the whole thing just kind of falls apart. And here they are. Question number one, the most important one, is about identity. What is the church? What is its essential nature, its DNA? Only after we've really wrestled with that can we properly ask question number two, which is about its function. Okay, so how does this church operate in the world? To put it simply, being has to come before doing. All right, so let's follow that proper theological order and start right where we should, with identity. Before we even begin to talk about what a church does, we first have to get a handle on what a church is. Now, this is the crucial point. This identity isn't something the church builds or earns or achieves. The source material calls them ontological marks, which I know sounds a bit academic, but it just means they describe the very being of the church. Think of it like its spiritual DNA. It's a gift from God, not a human accomplishment. And that distinction, it's absolutely fundamental.
So, what is this DNA? Well, the historic Christian creeds give us four essential marks. They say the church is one, it's holy, it's Catholic, which just means universal, and it's apostolic. This is its God-given identity. This is what the church is before it lifts a finger to do anything.
But, and this is a huge but, this is where we see what's been called the Great Reversal. In our modern way of thinking, we often flip this whole foundational order completely upside down. We don't lead with identity, we lead with function. And this just perfectly illustrates the problem, doesn't it? The proper theological order is that identity determines function. Is leads to does. But our common modern practice reverses it. We start with what a church does, and from all that activity, we try to construct an identity. Does leads to is. Just think about how we actually talk about churches in the real world. We almost always lead with these pragmatic, descriptive labels that are all about function, or style, or strategy. And you've heard all these labels 1,000 times, right? Is it a mega church, a house church? Is it a digital church, a missional one, or multicultural? Now let's be super clear. None of these descriptions are automatically bad. The danger is when these functional labels become the primary way we identify a church, when they start to overshadow those essential God-given marks we just talked about. So what? I mean, why does this reversal actually matter? What's the real cost of putting function before identity? What do we actually lose in the process? Well, this slide shows the shift in values just perfectly. When you start with identity, with being, you're focused on things like holiness, universality, and continuity with the faith of the apostles. But when you start with function, with doing, the focus naturally shifts to things like size, target audience, and methodology. The entire set of priorities gets rearranged. And here's the thing, what gets lost in that trade-off isn't minor. It's not some small detail. When we become obsessed with the how, the methods, the strategies, the programs, we run the very real risk of completely losing sight of the what.
we risk losing the very essence of what the church is divinely called to be. And at the end of the day, these are the ultimate stakes. Does our thinking lead us to see the church as a divinely constituted body, something brought into being by God Himself? Or does it accidentally reduce the church to just another human project, an organization that we design, that we build, and that we run?
Because when function is king, the church starts to look and act like any other human organization. It gets optimized for metrics that make perfect sense for a human project, things like relevance, growth, efficiency. But in that pursuit, it risks drifting away from its true anchor, its divine purpose, to simply be what God has made it, one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic.
And that leaves us with a final, kind of provocative question to really think about. When you think about your own church, or the churches you know and love, what defines them first and foremost in your mind? Is it their essential God-given identity? Or is it their function, their strategy, and their style? The answer might just reveal more than we think.